Hello, my name is Ava Strange, and I would like to share with you the most amazing books. Sorry, I couldn't resist. I swear this is, if not relevant, then at least pertinent. So I'm back today with my best, most favorite reads of the first half of 2026. And I'm going to be quite generous here today, name quite a high number of books, because I worry that if I limit myself to, let's say, a strict top 10, then this list might end up being more or less the same at the end of the year, with just a couple of books here and there that are different. So I'm going to do some shout outs as well at the beginning to books that for different reasons don't quite merit the title Best Read of the Year. And the first of these shout outs is for books that inspired my silly little intro just now. It is The Lamb and the Lion, Wolves Among Us by Gregory Ashe, or more precisely, the first two books in this trilogy, of which the third and last book was published today, July 13th. So for our time frame, the first 6 months of the year, this is as yet an unfinished series, so I can't quite pronounce a judgment on it yet. So this is Gregory Ashe's newest creation, his newest crime series. He is a writer of gay crime stories / romantic suspense, and his stories are always quite gritty, at least where the crime is concerned. It's often about organized crime, sometimes human trafficking, corruption of police and government. But by contrast, the relationships are always really, really tenderly depicted and really quite realistic, at least when it comes to the core of the characters. They are often quite fun as well. And The Lamb and the Lion, Wolves Among Us is the sequel trilogy to The Lamb and the Lion. And it is set in Utah, in Salt Lake City and the surrounding area. And one half of the central couple is a wildlife veterinarian, and he is also ex-Mormon. And in this sequel trilogy in particular, there have already been in the first two books quite a lot of Mormon shenanigans going on, and I've had a great time with it so far. And my second shout out goes to The Tarot Sequence by Katie Edwards, which is a longer series of which the first 3 books have been published, and these first 3 books complete one arc. The books are The Last Sun, The Hanged Man, and The Hourglass Throne. And I enjoyed these books a lot, first and foremost because of the characters, and in particular because of the main character's super lovable voice. He is the first person narrator of all 3 books. However, the books have major flaws. They are published by a press called Pyr, I think, Pyr, and I don't know if this is a straight up vanity press or if it's the by readers for readers kind of thing, which usually has not a lot of professionalism and expertise behind it. In any case, whichever it may be, the books give the impression of not having undergone any kind of editing process at all. Neither developmental editing, which would have helped with the world building, which makes absolutely no sense, nor copy editing, which would have weeded out the various grammatical and lexical errors, which are, to be honest, quite embarrassing. And it is really a testament to the fantastic characters and character voice that I was willing to overlook this. or at least I was willing to overlook it for the first 2 books. In the third book, Edwards lost me completely. He butchered all of his characters for in-group virtue signaling is what it is, and also the kind of fictional wish fulfilling of the author's chubby misfit teenage self that is so popular in particularly fantasy fiction right now. But it is so different from everything that was going on in the first 2 books and from everything that the first 2 books had going for themselves that, I guess I'm done with this series, and I'm not sure if I can pretend that the third book doesn't exist. However, I would still recommend the first 2 books for a fun popcorn reading experience. My last shout out comes without qualifications. It is for GhosTV by Jordan Castillo Price, which is book 6 in the Psychops series, which is a paranormal mystery series / romantic suspense, which also has an extremely lovable character voice. It's also first-person narration throughout. And in contrast to the tarot sequence, the world that Castillo Price has created seems to be very well thought out. It keeps expanding with each book, but in an organic seeming way. So this is another popcorn reading recommendation from me. My first real best read of the year is The Summer War by Naomi Novik. This is a little fantasy novella about a long-standing conflict between a human kingdom and the fairy kingdom. And in particular, it is about 3 persons who are caught in quite a mess that they made for themselves with curses and vows and promises, which they made without fully grasping the consequences and the gravity of what they were doing. And it made me unexpectedly emotional at the end. I have become a bit wary of Naomi Novik ever since the disaster that was Uprooted, even though I loved the Tamara series, and I'm very glad that I gave this one a chance. It was a real treat to read. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie doesn't need a lot of introduction from me. It's one of her greatest, most famous, most acclaimed mysteries. And for me, it was a case of, I see what you're doing here, Dame Agatha, and I approve of it, and I'm enjoying it very much. Death Trick by Richard Stevenson is the first book in a series about Private Eye Donald Strachey. It is set in Albany in 1979 and was published in 1981, and it is an authentic and a very candid look at the gay scene of the time. What I enjoyed most about it is actually its wry humor. It's really quite a tragic story and features a lot of tragic characters, but it is also nevertheless a very funny book. Frère by David Diop is probably better known to you under its English title At Night All Blood is Black, under which it won the International Booker Prize in 2021. It is a novella about a Senegalese soldier in the French Foreign Legions in World War I, in the trenches, who, when faced with the trauma and madness that is trench war, does not react with shell-shocked rejection of the brutality that is going on all around him and that he has to commit himself, but rather embraces it fully in a way that is both more honest and, of course, also not exactly socially acceptable, and whether it is more honorable is also debatable. It is written like a confessional spoken by the main character, and everything in this book feels upside down. But what would conventionally be called the upside, or what we'd expect to be the upside, also doesn't feel quite right. There is a line almost smack in the middle of the book which sums it up quite neatly. It says, "Toute chose est double." So there are two sides to everything, or two meanings to everything, or in a more sinister way, everything is two-faced. Including or beginning with the title, by the way. This, of course, gets lost completely in the English translation, but Frère d'âme means something like soulmate or brother in souls, but it is almost a homophone to Frère d'armes, which means brother in arms. And at the end of the book, it turns out that there is also a third meaning that you could read into Frère d'armes. So it's quite a simple title, but at the same time quite genius. And the story, it's in the end about unmasking the hypocrisy of it all, and also of the impossibility of making it out unscathed. Whatever you do, however you react, whatever path you choose, you are at the end damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's quite heartbreaking, and I'm glad it was short. So quite heartbreaking is Embers by Sándor Márai, which I read in the German translation from the Hungarian. This is a Hungarian classic which has as its main character a member of the old military nobility of the Austro-Hungarian Empire after this empire has in fact ended. And this nobleman has entombed himself in his big manor house in the countryside, where he has been for decades stuck in the past, preoccupied with memories of his youth and of the glory days of the defunct Habsburg Empire. But the thing is that these memories are not happy memories. He is hung up on an old friendship that he thinks that with the wisdom of hindsight, he can see clearly now for what it really was. And reading this felt like being in a therapy session where you are, in fact, the therapist who is listening to the patient go on and on, oblivious to all the many ways in which he is quite obviously his own worst enemy. It was really impressive in this way. And then I have two sequels, or later books in a series. The first is Porn in Frankincense by Dorothy Dunnett, which is book 4 in the Lymond Chronicles, about the adventures of the Scottish nobleman Sir Francis Crawford of Lymond, and they are set in the 18th century. This one is set almost entirely not in Scotland, but in several locations in the Mediterranean, which were at that point part of the Ottoman Empire. This was my least favorite book in the series. The first third in particular, I think, crossed the line into violence porn a little too often. But the thing is, the worst book in the Lymond Chronicles is still far above most historical fiction which is out there. I've said it many times, Dorothy Dunnett is for me part of a holy trinity of historical fiction, classic historical fiction, of which the other two are Patrick O'Brian, author of the Master and Commander books, Aubrey Maturin series, and of course the Queen, Mary Reynolds. And although I didn't like this book as much as its predecessors, I'm still really excited about going on with the Lymond Chronicles. And my other sequel is The Faith of Beasts by James S. A. Corey, the second book in the Captives' War. in which a far future human space colony gets annihilated by an insect-like species who have built a vast space empire and have enslaved thousands, if not millions, of civilizations. They typically take a choice selection of the most useful seeming specimens, I guess, individuals from each species that they conquer and destroy the rest of their world. In this second book, the humans that we are following, who have been selected by the space ants, they get a clearer look at the enormity of the situation that they are in and the hopelessness of any hope of escape from, let alone rebellion against the all-encompassing empire that the master species have built. However, I'm sure it's going to happen at some point. And then I've read quite a lot of German fiction this year, and quite successfully, which I will talk about more comprehensively towards the end of the year. But I have picked the 4 best books today, and I really enjoyed all of them a lot. And of the 4 books, 3 are of very recent publication date. They've been published in the last 20 years, and it's really untypical for me to have so many recent German publications as my favorite reads of the year so far. And so I'm really happy with my German reading this year, especially since these 4 books are the best German books that I've read so far this year, but they are not the only ones that I enjoyed. So this is really uncommon success with German fiction for my part. The one that is not a recent publication, but rather a modern classic, is Schwarze Spiegel by Arno Schmidt. That's him. And Schwarze Spiegel translates as Black Mirrors, but I'm not sure whether or not it has been translated into English. This is a novella set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland where the main character goes about his day. It is not meant to be any sort of realistic depiction of a, I don't know, post-nuclear dystopia, but rather it is a book about humans and about the main character's relationship to humanity, society, and its many foolish ways. I'm quite sure he is an avatar for the author, and he seemed to be a kindred spirit to me. That also made it a bit stressful to read, I'll be honest, and I'm sure to reread this at some point and reread this again, but not for some time, I think. The first of the more recent publications is Mittagsstunde by Dörte Hansen, which could be translated as something like siesta, noon siesta. I don't think it has been translated into English though. This book chronicles the evolution, or maybe rather devolution, of one fictitious northern German small town, or village rather, over the course of the 20th century. But it does so in a very concise, almost cursory way. So it's not a huge, epic, laborious, stuffy, multi-generational family chronicle or anything like that. It's short and sweet. And probably the aspect that I enjoyed most about it is that the main character is a scholar of prehistory and prehistoric archaeology, which I am not, but this is a discipline that is adjacent to my field, and I'm very familiar with it and with the sort of the culture and the conditions in this field. And I thought that the depiction was really, really well done, really hit the nail on the head, and it was really amusing to me. My second to last German book is Das finstere Tal, The Darkest Valley by Thomas Willmann, which is a western set in the Alps. To be honest, it had its problems. If I hadn't known certain pieces of metatextual information, like that it is a Western and a revenge story, I might have lost my patience with it. It had pacing problems, the pacing was labored, and also a lot of the story takes place in the past, and this past was related in two chunks, two big, lengthy chunks, when it could and should have been integrated, I think, more organically in the course of the story. So the writing, the structure of the book was not very elegantly done. However, the atmosphere, the sense of place, of this god-forsaken hidden high valley in the Bavarian wilderness, amazing. The command of language and style that the author has is just wonderful and made for a wonderful reading experience. I hope that this survives translation. The book has been translated into at least French and Dutch. I don't think it has been translated into English. My last book for today has been translated into English, and I'm very glad it's been translated because it deserves an international readership. I think it is by far my favorite, most special read of the year so far, and I'd be very surprised if it doesn't end up being my best book of the year at the end of the year. The book is Wie hoch die Wasser steigen by Anja Kampmann, and it is called High as the Waters Rise in the English translation. I'm going to make a review video of this book at some point in which I'm going to talk about it more in depth. But to summarize, this is the story of an oil rig worker in late middle age who loses his best friend / partner, as I will argue, in an accident on an oil rig, and this upends his life completely. He can't go on working on the oil rig after the accident, but after he's gone back on shore, he tragically and paradoxically feels more afloat than ever. Or maybe this loss has brought to his attention how uprooted and unmoored he really is, and how alone in the world he really is. And this is all the more tragic as this is happening to one of the most essential workers of our whole civilization. And it has happened before, in fact, to his parents, because his father immigrated to Germany from Poland to work in the now abandoned coal mines in the Ruhr region. So this story has happened once before and is now repeated in the son, like father, like son. And with neither of them, of course, nobody or few people deserve a sad life, but with these two in particular, it is in no way just compensation for the important work that they do or did. I said earlier that the character feels unmoored, and let's stay with the maritime metaphors, which are all mine. The cheesiness is all mine and not the author's fault, but he is afloat and without compass or direction. And reading this book also feels like being afloat. It just carries you along and you can only lean back and let it happen. It is an incredibly gentle book, an incredibly quiet book. I always read it late in the evening before going to sleep, because this is the kind of quiet time that the book deserves. I loved everything about it, and I'm looking forward to talking more about this in a special video. So that's it for now for my favorite reads of the year. I have a few videos planned, and I'm quite looking forward to making more videos again. I'll see you very soon. Take care, guys. Bye.